The new V28 release is going to have some amazing fillet enhancements, and I am particularly excited about these. Let's take a look at some new things we can do with fillets. Here I've got a microphone model that I want to update. So here I have my microphone in Alibre, and I'd like to make the final fillet. So I'll grab my fillet tool. We'll say a radius of 0.1 is great. And then as I start to fillet this out, I can see that I don't like this little face right there, right? I think that should be more dynamic than that. And if I increase my radius to say maybe 0.15, you can tell that that new size this feels a little bit too big because it conflicts with this edge a little bit, so it's not quite working out the way that I want. So I'll take this back to 0.1, and instead we now have this new setback capability, and get a load of this. I can go with blend vertices right here, right? This new feature, and when I select it, the edges of each fillet are set back, if you will, and I get a rounded corner. Now, it's not just that I can round out a corner, but I also have this manual setbacks function, right? So if I click on manual setbacks, now I'm given a certain distance value, and as I increase this distance value, get a load of this. Look how I can change my corner so much. So I'll give this a setback value of 0.6, and now my corner is completely filled in. But it doesn't even end there, because right now I have this curvature, but I have this bulge value of 0.5. What if I make this bulge value really small, right? 0.0001. Well, now I'm looking at a very flattened version of that bulge, right? Quite flat. And then if I go to a bulge value of 2, I get a much pointier corner within that manual setback. So I have a lot of control of how I use these setbacks. For me, I think a setback of, or I should say a bulge of 0.5 is just the right curvature to me. And I can continue selecting my edges as I go around my microphone. And with very little effort, I've been able to apply these amazing setbacks to my corners. Again, an enhancement in the new V28 release. Now, as cool as that is just one part of many on our V28 fillet update list. Let's take a look at another one. We have a big update on variable radius fillets. Here I have a fighter jet, and I want to focus on the fillet on this wing. As it comes to the back, you can see the size makes this edge that goes all the way to the back, and it curves downward a little bit. Maybe on review we would find that problematic, and we would want to make a few adjustments. Well, what can we do here? I can show this in the Feature Explorer, and if I try to edit this fillet, I can say, yes, let's go down a bit smaller. And maybe that edge looks a little bit better, but maybe this section here is just too small now. It's a bit of a dilemma, but thanks to the new features in Alibre, we can make some changes. We have an update on the variable radius fillet, and instead of just choosing 2 points, we're able to choose points anywhere along edges or sequences and make them whatever radius we'd like. In this case, maybe I'd like to start out being 0.01 on the start and end. But, of course, while this is very agreeable on this back edge, it's way too small in the middle. But, as you can see, I have an edge all the way down the sequence of my fillet, and I can select that point that I just made, and I can say, I want to make this actually much larger. And I can do the same over here. Maybe I want this to be a bit smaller. And there, I'm able to create a fillet that changes its radius at any point down the sequence. If I'd like, I also can take this point and move it down or up so that I can adjust my fillet. And so being able to adjust these multi-radius fillets sure make fillets able to work in places where they would not otherwise be able to work. And it's easy to start thinking about how many more advancements and features that you can make with these kinds of fillets. Look how much cleaner that is without an edge going all the way back. But it isn't just making fillets more flexible that this feature can introduce, but even new workflows and ways of doing things. Here I have a video game controller in 2 halves, and I was able to make this with variable radius fillets, as well as a few other modeling techniques. Let's take a look at the details as I open up this top half. Here I have one of the halves of the controller, and it's still a work in progress. I haven't been able to model the internals yet, but as you can see, I think variable radius fillets played a very crucial role in being able to make a shape such as this. Let's roll the tree back and see what that looks like. First, I created a large extrude, and then I cut it down to size with another extrusion. And then I did a small loft to get some curviness on the bottom, and then it was time for fillets. I did a single fillet on the bottom that had, of course, the variable radius feature, and then another one on top to generate the body of the controller. Let's take a closer look at what that might look like. I can select a variable radius fillet from my top ribbon, and I can choose this edge. Now immediately it of course assigns the start to be 0.5 and the end to be 0.5, and I can click a point in the middle, and I can start taking the size of that down. And then I can click another point, and it'll make this something like 0.35. And I can start adjusting my fillet size as I go for the top and the bottom. Another thing that I can point out is right now we have 2 sequence and 2 edge. So I'm saying that this is about 60%, in fact I can even type 60 if I'd like, down this edge. And I can adjust this to 20 if I'd like to see this update to a different spot on this particular edge that I'm working on. I also can say I want this to the entire sequence. Now this is 60.5% through the entire sequence of edges. And I can say, yes, I want this to be 65 on the entire sequence of edges. So the sequence and edge options are simply to say, do I want to measure how far I am down to this particular edge that I've clicked, or do I want to measure it down the entire sequence of edges in the full path of the radius fillet? You can adjust those here, type in your own values, and you can drag the points as we've seen before. Even with variable radius fillets, we still have the options to blend vertices and even do manual setbacks should we want to with a multi-radius fillet. So those options are still available that we've already seen on the microphone. When we're all done, we can click OK and start work on our other half of our controller. Now it seems to me like there are almost endless possibilities of what you can do with these new fillet tools, but there's even another thing that we have to go through. Let's take a look at our constant width fillets. Here I have the leg off of a manufacturing kettle, and I would like to finish this off by putting a fillet right there to work with stress concentrations, right? We don't want to have too sharp of edges where there's going to be a lot of stress. So I'll add my fillet, but it didn't quite come in the way that I'd hoped. You see, this is a constant radius at 0.475, and this very large angle here made for a small fillet, but look how large it gets over here because 0.475 at that sharp of an angle just makes the fillet grow. That's too big. So what can we do about a fillet like this? Well, we might be able to do a multi-variable radius fillet like we did on the last part, but there's a better way. I got this little option here to size by chord length. Now, the chord of a fillet is the end of an arc to the end of another arc. Just draw a straight line between the arc ends, and that's the length. So if I click on size by chord length, the fillet becomes much more well behaved. And so when we work with fillets in Alibre, we now have the option to not just have these blending vertices and setbacks and everything else, but we also can tell it, hey, let's have a constant chord length and have a much more well-behaved fillet as it progresses through a series of changing angles. So this is one more tool that you can put on your tool belt. Now, if all that wasn't enough for our fillet features, we have another big enhancement. Let's take a look at what that is. Saving fillets till the end of your design is great advice, and at the end of this design are a whole lot of fillets. But in the new V28. Release, we've got new ways of doing fillets that can change all this. Here in the latest edition of Alibre, if I scroll to the bottom, we can see that there are a lot of fillets in a single feature. And if we pay attention, we can see that these fillets are of all different sizes. So how does this work? Let's take a look at how we can get so many fillets in one feature. So when working with a model like this, we'll want to make sure that we have smooth edges. I'll open up my fillet tool and I'll start selecting faces and edges that I think would be great to have this fillet on. There we are. And then when I'm all done with this radius, I'd probably say apply and move on to a fillet with a different radius. But this is where the changes happen in the V28. Release. I'll right click and add a group here. So I'm able to add different fillet groups of different radius values. Maybe I want this to be 0.25, and I'll click on this edge. And just like that, we are able to do multiple radii within a single fillet feature. When I click apply, you can see all of these fillets are under fillet 19. And so I can add many fillets in one single fillet feature of all different kinds of sizes. So whether you want to do radiuses by a constant chord length, or whether you want to make variable radius fillets, if you want to blend and smooth your vertices, if you want to do it all in one single fillet feature, there is something in Alibre for you in this release. Happy filleting!